Please welcome Director, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, Chris Krebs, and Executive Director and CEO of the Sovereign Foundation, Heather Dahl.
Heather?
Hello, welcome.
Good morning.
Sit down. It's good to sit down with you this morning and 4,000 of our closest friends. I think in order to make this interesting, let's start with the lightning round.
Okay.
We'll warm you up, okay? Ready? Exit row aisle.
I am an exit row window.
Okay. Exit row, do you have a strategy?
Pay attention to
Okay.
the pre-flight briefing. Know what you're going to do. Have a
Okay,
plan.
and now let's hit you with the most difficult question of this entire 30 minutes. How do I explain what CISA does to my 14-year-old?
Oh boy. The easiest way, the way we describe the agency, so it's the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency at the Department of Homeland Security. We like security so much it's in our name twice. A little vagary of the congressional legislation drafting process. We're the nation's risk advisor. That's the way we see it. We were established in 2018 by act of Congress, and it took an element of the Department of Homeland Security that you probably have heard of, US CERT or the NCIC, and elevated it into a standalone agency like TSA or FEMA.
Right, and it's still fairly a young agency. We'll say that.
I mean, youngest in the federal government.
What have been the challenges in sharing threat and attack information among the government agencies and also the private sector?
So we have an interesting set of responsibilities and authorities. So the department was established in 2003, right? And my part of the department was established principally to bring industry and government together to understand what the threat landscape looks like and share information. With that, though, I have a different set of responsibilities for the federal agencies. So we develop a series of capabilities that we then deploy across the 99 civilian agencies. Intrusion detection system, intrusion prevention system, and also continuous diagnostics and mitigation capabilities to really understand what's happening internal to the network.
So help me understand, how do the intelligence communities fit into all of this?
Yeah, so that's that interesting space where we sit at the intersection of government and industry. So we are an all-source agency, effectively. So I can take information from the intelligence community, from the private sector threat intelligence groups, and fuse together the bigger picture. And in fact, that's what we did last summer, June 22nd. I released an alert that was cobbled together from the intelligence community, classified information, from the information we saw across the civilian agencies from our monitoring capabilities, and then from the threat intelligence community companies that said, hey, we're seeing an increase in Iranian activity, spear phishing, cred stuffing, password spraying. Something's up. There was a hockey stick effect. So we took that, pulled it all together, an all-source bulletin, and sent it out on a Saturday afternoon, which I know all the CISOs in the room, the network defenders, hate getting weekend alerts, but it was just that time. The time was right. We sent this out, and we provided a series of recommendations highlighting the fact that the Iranian actors, particularly the IRGC, were prone to destructive attacks, and that this is a thing that everybody needs to pay attention to.
So how common is it that you can issue those type of alerts? What was the significance of that?
That one specifically, this statement was, again, it was this fusing together of different sources of information. But through our US CERT brand, we tend to issue, I think today alone we're issuing 4 or 5 industrial control systems related alerts. We issued one last week. We issue alerts on a daily basis, and this is actually a great example of why industry and government, why we need to work with our industry partners, because if you see something, you can share it with us, and then we can amplify that information. We can validate, and then we amplify it.
So let me be a skeptic on that.
Okay.
I'm in the industry, my company suffers an attack breach, and it's not public news. I know about it. Does it make sense that I would want to disclose that information if no one else really knows? And first of all, do I put myself at more risk
Right.
by making that disclosure? And second of all, am I not just helping my competition because A, they're going to learn from my experience, and B, maybe it'd be good if they did suffer the same thing I did? How do you address that point of view with industry?
So that latter point I'm not going to touch, but generally so there are a series of authorities that we have that provide liability protection. So if you provide information to us, we protect it, we anonymize it, we share it. So when our alerts go out, it's not that company X suffered a breach and here are the characteristics of the event. It's a company in this sector or segment had an event, they had this industrial control system related activity or incident, and so we send it out in an anonymized way because really what we're trying to do here is understand the landscape, understand the conditions on top of it and what the adversary might be doing, and get that out so the next victim might not happen. And this is particularly important in the broader ransomware conversation.
So let's talk about that in the sense of the geopolitical risk. What is the geopolitical risk of the U.S. government collaborating in a more open way with industry and government agencies together? Is it, the same argument from a skeptic point of view? Well, any adversary or enemy can just go on the website and learn what we know.
Yeah, so I'm not a big fan of security by obscurity. I don't think it works. I think that we need to get ahead of the curve in a collective defense approach where, the historical or cliche or whatever is the enemy's only got to be right once and we have to be right every single time. I think through layered defense, I'm not sure that holds true. But if everybody does work together, that everybody pulls together as a team and shares information rapidly enough that we can build up better defenses. And that's really the unique thing, again, about my agency, is that we are not, in that role of the nation's risk advisor, we're not the nation's risk manager. You own and operate your systems. You own the risk. But what we do is we get an understanding, again, across federal networks, across the private sector. We pull together that broader understanding, and we facilitate a knowledge transfer from the haves to the have-nots. And so, yes, there are the big banks that spend a whole lot of money on security. I'm probably not going to be able to help them on a day-to-day vulnerability scanning sort of assistance. We can help them on the intelligence side, but they are learning things that I can push to, down that XY axis, that folks that don't have the investment that may not be as sophisticated.
So when we talk about the larger landscape and the world that we're in, we live in a GDPR world, we live in a CCPA world, we also live in a world where a lot of the calculations on the cost of breaches are made from downtime, from the data that was lost, and it's not necessarily focused on the personal information. What is your advice, and it's the role of the nation's advisor, to organizations who are trying to make that risk-reward calculation on, do I change my mindset and how I think about security, like sharing information with others, versus the legacy, let's stay in the same mindset and keep the same technology in place?
Yeah, so I'm gonna answer the question in the context of ransomware. That is, for years and years and years, particularly in the federal government, we've been focused on the nation-state adversary, the highly capable, the big four: Russia, China, Iran, North Korea. And I think we've been a little bit late to the game on ransomware, which is, my deputy calls it a menace to society. I call it the scourge of the internet. This is the thing that I think the average American has to experience. And so that is the thing that they see in their schools, their hospitals, their municipal agencies. And so the challenge here is the question of, do you pay and do you report? What I've said, and this is an individual risk management decision at this point for each organization, is don't pay. For one reason, you're validating the business model. The second is the keys don't always work. Maybe 20 to 50% of the time does a recovery key work on a ransomware attack. And third is, what are you going to do if it doesn't work? You pay it out. Are you going to sue them? Small claims court or whatever? It just doesn't work.
The majority of businesses are small to mid-sized businesses. What is your role in providing advice to businesses those size? Because for them, some of them may think a good strategy is paying it out.
Right.
What kind of resources, information is available to those size companies, and do they have anything to offer?
So we're hoping to engage across, particularly with small and medium-sized businesses, with state and local governments, left of boom. We want to get there before they have an incident. And,
Right.
and again, you know, I'm not naive to understand that we're going to go get everybody, but to the extent that we can engage, do this knowledge transfer, share information, help them update their systems, help them implement multi-factor authentication, have an incident response plan, recoverable backups that they're tested, then they're going to be better off for when that bad thing happens. But when that bad thing does happen, we can provide some advisory assistance on getting back up.
I want to pick up on the thread about Iran, and you just talked about previously, January 3rd of this year. Very interesting day for you. The U.S. launched the strike against the Iranian military leader, and then your vacation ended.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about that and its connection to ransomware.
So when you look back at the summer, June 22nd, we were already in an enhanced posture with respect to threats from Iran. So we'd had a plan, an internal plan, ready to go that if anything were to change across, you mentioned earlier, geopolitical risk, if anything were to change across that landscape, we could snap into place a number of engagement mechanisms for our partners. So January 2nd, I'm pulling in the driveway after a week down in the Outer Banks, roll in, and boom, we get notification of the strike. So immediately pull together a series of calls in coordination with industry. Over the course of a week, we were able to share information. We were able to stand up calls with our critical infrastructure, state and local and federal agency partners. About 26,000 individuals is the math that we've done. And at the same time, using our insight of what the Iranian actors are capable of and emerging trends in industry like the MITRE ATT&CK framework, and pushed out what we know about the TTPs, the Iranian actor, with detections and mitigations, and got that out to our partners. So that now, we also understand that at that point, if they were going to do something, they were probably already in the systems that they would want to achieve their strategic objectives. But connecting all back to your ransomware point, when everything kind of died down at the end of the next week, we didn't want to take our foot off the gas because we had the nation's attention. We had leadership's attention. I feel like we have three audiences. One is the network defenders, the second is the C-suite and the executive decision makers, and the third is the general public. My job is to help everyone in this room. If you're in the network defense community, if you're a CISO, my job is to help you and take down some barriers as you go into the boardroom, as you go into the C-suite, as you engage your general counsels, to give authoritative, credible information on what the threat landscape looks like and the actions that you need to take. So if I can say, look, Iran, they are capable, data destruction attack. A destructive attack looks a lot like ransomware. So let's go ahead and defend against these ransomware capabilities, and so that when Iran, if they come back 6 months from now, we're in a better position.
So, and this was a great example of using something that was going on at the time, in this case Iran, to bring up an issue that was continuously happening, like ransomware. The other news of the day right now, elections.
Yep.
What are the technical challenges that the U.S. electoral system faces right now going into this fall's elections?
So on the cryptographers panel, you just heard from Ron Rivest, who talked about some of the progress that's been made, but also the vulnerabilities in the system. So the technical challenges are actually underpinned by the broader administrative challenges of elections. In the United States, Article 1, Section 4 of the Constitution says the states will determine the time, place, and manner of conducting of the federal elections. And that has manifested into about 8,800 election jurisdictions across the country. And it's also an area that prior to 2016, I'm not sure it was on anybody's radar that this was in play for geopolitical risk. Ron talked a little bit about the election machines and the requirement for paper ballots. What we have done over the last couple of years is put a lot of attention on risk assessments across the system, all the way from registering to vote to certification of the vote process, and try to figure out where the risk really is across these systems. And I think what we've discovered, not surprisingly, is the areas where information is centralized and it's highly networked, that's where a lot of the risk is. And what is that? Voter registration databases. So over the last year, again, ransomware, thinking through some threat modeling of what an adversary might do, not even a nation-state adversary, but a criminal that understands we care about election security. We got a big election coming up. I bet I can go pop that database and ask for $2 million, and I bet they'll pay.
So what happens if this, what does your organization do if come late October, November, we learn this happened? Is there a rule?
So we've been, again, since about last year, we've put a lot of focus on providing vulnerability management capabilities and assistance to the 50 states and local jurisdictions to get ahead of this so we can harden as much as possible. But we also recognize that 100% security is not achievable.
Correct.
So we're focusing on increasing resilience. So again, it's just like any other ransomware event. You have an offline backup that you test and you practice and you have a plan, know what you're going to say to the voting public, the press, the political parties, but also have an analog backup. You know, have your paper voter rolls, and not just at the state level, but at the individual precinct level.
So what can CISA do to assure the American public about the integrity of the elections?
So this is kind of what I've been saying is 2016 was a wake-up call, front-to-back wake-up call across the federal government. There is no single issue that I'm involved in that I've seen this level of engagement and clarity of purpose and jointness of mission. The intelligence community, the federal law enforcement, my team, and the election administration folks, the Election Assistance Commission. Everybody is at this issue as hard as any other issue I've seen. At the same time, state and locals in 2016, they didn't realize they were on the front lines of this geopolitical conflict, and they now are all aboard. We have a dedicated information sharing and analysis center for state and locals. All 50 states and about 2,500 jurisdictions are engaged. So again, the American people need to understand that we are taking this seriously, we're engaged on it, but 100% security is not going to be the outcome.
Right.
So no, you as the voter have to have a plan for voting as well.
Well, and the other part, one is, yes, attacks on the databases, but the other one that we've heard a lot about here at RSA and Solutions are around fake news and deep fakes. Yeah. And on one hand, was the real damage to the 2016 election when it comes to these issues and introducing this as a part of our election?
So what Ron was talking about was paper ballots. Why are paper ballots important? So that you have an auditable record. That's just a core tenet of IT security, that you can audit the process and look back at the log. Same thing goes for voting. If there's any question, you can go back to the paper, you have the receipts, and you can check it and get to that outcome you want. At the same time, you have to think about the strategic objectives. This is my view, strategic objectives of the adversary. To be able to change the vote at scale in an undetected manner, given the decentralized nature of the individual voting machines in the United States, is really complicated. It's a high investment, there's a lot of risk with it, and it's going to be difficult to achieve. On the other hand, what if you just targeted one or two jurisdictions in key spaces and then got caught? Right. And then you amplify that. So what we've got to be able to do is work with our partners in state and local, work with our Department of Defense and intelligence community partners so that they can go disrupt over there. But here, we have time right now to understand what the threats are and then inoculate the public in part. And that we can share, this is what they're going to try to say, this is what they might try to do. This is the point, though, that it's not about a single outcome of an individual race. It's about a broader destabilizing of the public, of our confidence in the system. And that's what was so shocking, I think, about 2016. I've said it's like the Sputnik moment. And what do I mean by that? So in 1957, when the Soviets put Sputnik in space, beat us to low Earth orbit, that was shocking enough. But the fact that they had an intercontinental ballistic missile that could geographically overcome oceans and reach out and touch us, that was a big deal. 2016 was the first time, I think, for the elected officials, for the American public to truly understand that cyber could destabilize a democracy. And that's where we are right now.
So I'm going to shift the conversation a little bit. You brought up two key components, the decentralization of the election system and the central data repositories. To ask you a question more for those who are working on the emerging tech side of things. When it comes to blockchain and decentralized networks that are being developed, what is CISA's role in providing advice to those types of technologies?
So again, I can use the concept within elections. Ron was, and he talked about a couple other researchers that worked with the National Academy of Sciences to talk about internet voting. And there have been some concepts that would use the blockchain to transmit a vote. And that's fine, but if it's garbage in, it's garbage out. And so we still are not in a position, I think, on the actual mobile devices and the computing space, the personal computers and whatnot, where we have confidence that those systems are clean enough, so to speak, that you're going to get the authentic, credible piece of information in there relative to the vote and then transmit it into the tabulation system.
So it's interesting, garbage in, garbage out, which brings up the point that we're now living in a world where we trust every site, every app, every platform to be in our homes, to be in our offices, rifling through our drawers, through our files. And aside from the creepiness factor in some of this, it seems to be a risk that personal data is out there for anyone who wants to go buy it. It seems like that could also be a national security risk. So if the role of the government is to protect citizens, what do you think CISA's role is in protecting personal data?
So this is part of that knowledge transfer piece. It's helping organizations update, defend their system to get to a better security outcome. You know, if you talk about the broader vision or mission of the agency, it's to improve American cybersecurity. And that gets to the point of helping organizations secure the data they have. Now, that's today. What about tomorrow? Right. And that's our motto. It's defend today, secure tomorrow. So what are the things that we can do down the road to help ensure that we have a more secure identity? Move away from the social security number as a identification element. So we work with a range of partners, including the President's National Security Telecommunications Advisory Council, to look at what are alternative identity management opportunities.
Well, one of those would be sovereign. So we'll have to talk after this more, but exactly, you know, as we close out our conversation here, you know, we've really talked about a lot of top-down security approaches, and there's no one who can do business without touching technology. You look at farmers using data to maximize their yields. Even my daughter is selling her drawings on Etsy. What is the responsibility to educate at the grassroots level?
This is much like that tension I mentioned earlier, that balance between nation-state adversaries, but at the same time making sure that we're addressing the threats that the average American people see in ransomware. Same thing goes here. We tend to really focus on systemic risk. What are those things that can undermine the economy, national security, public health, and safety? But at the same time, we've got to be able to ensure that the underlying, the grassroots, doesn't get to a position where it in and of itself is no longer functional. So that broader public, you know, we've historically done the National Cybersecurity Awareness Month piece, but we haven't gone far enough. So it's about working with organizations to help tech companies to help them ensure better security by design and deployment, but also help educate the American public.
So one could say, you know, we haven't gone far enough, and there's a responsibility on the tech industry also to help educate at the grassroots level. Do you think one of the reasons we may not have gone far enough is because it inhibits the growth of the data economy if we educate more people about what's happening with their data?
Oh, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that's a risk that I would be too concerned about, because innovation will happen. Depending on how you shape it. It's just, you know, data wants to be free in some respects, but so does innovation want to stay ahead of it. So we're going to continue to help organizations get better security by design and deployment, and that's all across a range of systems, including IoT and particularly as we move into 5G. If anybody's filling out a bingo card, I think I've probably filled one out for you.
Well, taking this back to our theme, cybersecurity, being a posse, what does this theme mean to you?
So this is both the imagery and the words. The imagery, this is an inside joke. So Andre the Giant has a posse is an inside joke. For us, Pineapple has been adopted as our election security spirit animal or mascot. And also for the cybersecurity community, Wi-Fi Pineapples, all that, so it means something to us. But the word cybersecurity as a posse, we are only going to be able to do this together. The African proverb of if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. This is what we have to achieve here. Common purpose, working together, industry, government. Please work with me. Check us out online. Go to CISA.gov. We can figure out how to do this together. You can see all the resources we have available, but more importantly, we're hiring. Come work with us. We got plenty. We got hundreds of opportunities to work with folks. So thank you for the opportunity to
yes,
speak with you.
thank you. Thank you for spending
Thank
this
you.
time
Thank
together with me. Thank you for spending this time together with us.
Got it.
Thank you.
Thank you.